Welcome to the Halfway Cafe, everybody. I am Dash MacIntyre. I got Adrian Polk here. Welcome, everybody joining. Oh, wow. A lot of people joining. Cool. Thanks for tuning in on this Friday night. We got some good stuff to talk about. First up, obviously, the big news is the breakup between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Have you been glued to Twitter or Threads or wherever you get
I don't
your
have any of
posts?
those, but when
Oh,
you go to
really?
CNN.com, you can see like they
Oh,
it's basically the same thing. They have like Elon Musk and Trump Twitter feud or whatever.
yeah, right. So I guess right off the bat, how funny is it that Elon Musk admitted that he helped elect a pedophile? Because he did call Donald Trump a pedophile, and he did spend $300 million to elect this pedophile. Elon Musk, of course, if you haven't heard, Elon Musk and Trump have been feuding. They've been doing little bitchy posts at each other back and forth. And then Elon Musk did claim that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files, and that's why they're not released yet. So that's kind of hilarious. Um,
I want to see it. I want to see the proof.
yeah, right. Do you
It's
think
like
the
it's the
Epstein?
dumbest conspiracy for like the last 6 years, right? Is everybody who's been on that island and has been an associate. But yeah, I don't know. It's pretty weird. You see the picture of him like dancing at a party with him and
Yeah,
like talked about how he likes him young. Like that's pretty weird.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of evidence that they're good friends and have been, or I guess were, past tense. I don't know. Right off the bat, you want to throw out any conspiracy theories about it? Do you think Epstein, really committed suicide? Did someone kill him? Do you think they faked it and he's like still alive, but just in the fascist equivalent of a witness protection?
I don't know. I wonder, like, I mean, it's not that crazy to think that he would try to kill himself, right?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
you fall that far down, you live a lavish lifestyle, you obviously can't live the rest of
Yeah,
your life like that. I wonder, I don't know, maybe someone paid him to give him something that he
yeah,
could kill himself with. I don't know if it's necessarily a conspiracy theory. I mean, the
yeah.
whole idea that someone came in and killed him and it was the Clintons or Trump and then Bill Barr did cover, like, that gets so huge. And then who else, the Department of
Yeah,
Justice, would have to see that? That's not something the Attorney General can do by
right.
himself.
And people in the
So,
prison, it does start becoming a
yeah,
thing. Like that's a lot of people to keep the secret when there's, I guess, theoretically a lot of financial gain if you could, divulge what you know.
yeah.
Um, let's
Because you
see.
could just
What do
tell a
you?
security guard, I imagine, like, hey, I'll give you like $800,000 if you just give me something I can kill myself with. You know,
Yeah. Well, that's true for
you
yeah.
quit your
That's
prison job if you got that kind of money.
yeah. What do you think if the Epstein files were revealed? I mean, I wouldn't put it past Trump to like obviously doctor them and then put them out and then like I don't know, like fake it, have it still blacked out, not release all the details, or just I guess I would not be surprised either if they just never post it or never reveal it, and then they just act like, oh, Pam Bondi already revealed it, that whole like kind of gimmick that they tried to do. But let's say the files were revealed somehow. Like, I guess, did Elon Musk see them? Like, if Elon Musk is claiming that he's in them, like, does
Yeah.
that mean a lot of people in the administration are aware of Trump's inclusion? Gash Patel and what's his name, Dan Bongino, are a little squirrely in interviews when they're talking about it. Trump himself has mentioned he doesn't want to reveal it because, like, oh, there's a lot of people that would be, their names would be revealed even if they weren't necessarily like the pedo rapists, but like, if they just hung out with Epstein or something like that. But let's say it did get revealed in its entirety and Trump was in it. What do you think MAGA would do? Do you think MAGA would just move the goalpost and say, I don't care, a lot of people did it? They'd give him a pass. What percentage would you guesstimate of MAGA people would maybe turn on Trump if he was outed as a real pedophile?
I don't know. I mean, if he got outed as a pedophile, like in 2028, and he were to run again for a third term, would
Yeah, right.
I mean, would that move like a third of 1% of the vote? There'd be like 8% of independents being, I don't really like that
Right.
president, and that
Yeah,
would
yeah.
be it.
It would be interesting because like QAnon has been big into this about like the deep state, like all Democrats are pedophiles and they drink baby blood and all that kind of thing. So would they have the cognitive coherence to change their minds on Donald Trump and want him out? I don't know. I guess we'll never know until it happens, as
Well, you
unlikely as
can.
that might be.
I mean, there's so much where you can just avoid the evidence that's inconvenient or you don't want to see. Like, for them talking about how how much of pedophiles Democrats are. Like, Trump was running like under 18 beauty pageants or 18-year-old
Yeah, right.
beauty pageants for a
A
little
lot
bit.
of
That's pretty
teen,
weird.
and then
Yeah,
infamously going into the locker rooms and trying to
yeah.
snoop and bragging about how, he obviously started the pageant to do that. Kind of an expensive way to try to hit on women and young girls, I guess. But
Yeah, but I mean, there's that. I mean, every part of everything is so inconvenient, right? You talk about corruption and draining the swamp, you ignore all the obvious corruption. Like,
yeah,
name another president that's made billions of dollars while they're in office. Like,
yeah, with the Trump stock, the pump and dump crypto scams,
I mean,
the
Jared
like the
Kushner getting a
graft.
$2 billion
Yeah,
check from the
yeah.
Saudis, like that's pretty fucked up.
Trump getting a $400 million plane. I still can't get over
Yeah.
that. And then let's see, Trump got back at Elon Musk. I don't know if he's done it yet. There have been a couple posts like that maybe were from Trump's, like, him doing his Truth Social, but obviously some of those are fake, and people do that. But I think maybe he hinted at it that Elon Musk was using drugs. I think that's a great excuse for Trump to blame Elon Musk's sudden change of heart, is just say he was fucked up on drugs all the time. Obviously, Elon using drugs is maybe the least surprising aspect of all of this. Like some of these press conferences he does, he looks pretty, pretty high looking around the
Yeah.
Oval Office. And then like the stunts where he like went on stage at CPAC. Like I think one time he was like wearing sunglasses, the chainsaw thing, him going out of his way to say things like "I am become meme" or whatever. Like a lot of his jokes that
I
just
mean,
kind
that's
of
just kind
fall
of
flat.
nerdy. I think some of
Yeah.
that's kind of nerdy and not necessarily like a drug addict, but like, I think it's weird because like you always hear these stories. Like people talked about how he's been taking drugs for months since he came
Yeah,
in
he has talked
before the
about
election. Like,
he's
yeah,
talked about that he uses ketamine for like depression, but then he says I haven't used like I don't use any drugs. I haven't used ketamine in like years, even though that's like he's within a year he's mentioned it.
yeah. It's also kind of messed up. Like he has a security clearance and like doing tons of drugs.
Yeah,
Like, no,
right.
there should be an investigation. He should lose the clearance. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know why you get to have all these contracts worth billions of dollars to the federal government. It's like one of those things where obviously, like when you're important and have money, the rules are different. But like, I don't think the
Right.
rules should be that different.
Yeah, yeah, right. Let's see. This is an interesting fact I wanted to pull out. The Washington Post reported that Trump has posted 2,262 times on True Social in 132 days, and that was like maybe a couple of days ago that fact was pulled out. So he's basically been posting 17 times per day on average, which is 3 times more posts than his first term. Is that a good thing for a president to do? Just like posting 17 times a day of like whatever deranged things are just going on in his lizard brain.
It is pretty wild, especially if you think of like all the amount of time it takes to like write it and then fix typos and then think about it. I don't know if they think about it very much, but like when you're tweeting or whatever like that many times a day, like it adds up. And if you're
Yeah,
proofreading and thinking about it and fixing typos, like what is it, like an hour and a half a day just tweeting or whatever, at
yeah.
least.
And the sad thing is, it's not even, he doesn't even write well. Like he uses weird capitalization. He just did another post where he did like 3 words and that was the post. And there's like, obviously, I guess he got distracted and maybe accidentally hit send or something. It's like, it was something like, it was just like 3 words. It was like energy, oil, something like that. Like, yeah, just kind of weird. But, um, I mean, I guess, that's Trump's kind of power source, and that is the thing he likes. And he's really just kind of an attention whore, right? He just wants the conversation about him. And it's kind of always been like that. Like you can go back in like 2012, like his tweets are about like Robert Pattinson should break up with what the Twilight actress or whatever. Like he got really into that. Just like a total idiot that just like it's like Creed Bratton from The Office, where he's just they make him that fake Word document. He can put his thoughts out there, but not actually subject people to it. Um,
Well,
yeah,
I mean, I guess in a way, it's like not making policy and not doing
yeah,
things,
right.
right? It's like if you take the like silly little press conferences he has and all this the time he spends. I don't know. Just think of every holiday too. That's something that's really unusual for a president to spend like Memorial Day and Veterans Day, like just bad mouthing your political opposition,
And
talking
half
about
the
the
country.
yeah
Yeah,
depraved lunatic communist
yeah,
socialist
right,
Democrats and the
right.
haters.
And the haters. Yeah, that's my favorite
Yeah,
part.
like
Amidst all of this hubbub, there was a little blowback. AOC was saying like she was asked for a comment on the Elon Trump feud, and she said like the girls are fighting or something like that. And I hate to do this. It's just like one tweet that somebody did that then went viral, but someone was like acting like it was sexist for her to say that
Oh
or something
yeah.
like, why do we always got to talk about the girls? And it's like, I guess you kind of have a point, but like just like let it go. Like pick your battles, a little bit. But I just wanted to highlight that. That is one, as liberal as I am, it's like some liberals can be so annoying. It's not really the
Well,
biggest issue.
yeah. What people get confused by is like, okay, so there's stereotypes and we make humor of them and they're funny, right? And they wouldn't be funny if they weren't kind of true in some way, but
All
then
right.
like also like just because you laugh at a stereotype doesn't mean you treat every single person in that group that way. You still treat
Right.
everybody
Right.
as an authentic individual
Yeah.
who deserves dignity and,
Yeah.
I don't know, benefit of the doubt. But yeah, I mean, it's just funny. Like, I mean, how many people are making jokes about men too and toxic like male masculinity or whatever?
Yeah.
It's like
All
that's
men are
funny too.
trash, that kind of
Yeah,
thing. Yeah. Right.
yeah. And it would be funny if it
Uh,
wasn't kind of based in true. Men are, people make fun of women for being illogical, but a lot of times men are twice as illogical. And a
right.
lot of men just pretend like they're more logical. And I mean, these are all kind of funny stereotypes as well. I don't know.
Yeah, it was kind of a bigger thing too, because then people are like, well, that's just homophobic because it's really something gay people use all the time, like girls, including boys. It's like, at a certain point, it's just like, and I think that's kind of like, I guess to turn this into a larger issue is like the issue with the groups or whatever that is kind of
Yeah.
like the buzzword with like the Democratic Party's kind of issues with like the extreme identity politics, but you just narrow everyone down into their own little silos of their own individual identity politics. And then it's just this like unproductive feuding amongst everybody over who's the biggest victim. And then meanwhile, you get like a fascist elected because a lot of like centrist moderate voters are just like the Democrats are nuts because that's all they turn every issue into something like, well, technically that's sexist. No, that's homophobic. It gets a little frustrating.
What I think it's really funny how everybody does that. Like, so Republicans talk about the liberals and say Democrats this, blah blah blah, and like, oh, everything's about identity politics. But I mean, conservatives, religious people, other groups that are typically on the right, they're just as bad as anyone else. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
Trump is
I've
the biggest victim of them all. He hires all these people. They end up being crazed lunatics who hate him, and it's like, oh,
yeah,
poor me. This guy was a moron. He didn't know what he was. He
right,
couldn't cut it. And like, I don't know
yeah.
the mean liberal media, Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, everyone it's out to get him apparently.
Yeah. I just wish it would be less self-destructive on the liberal side. And liberals are kind of in a tough spot because I've said this before, but Republicans are like the ones who invented identity politics because they're kind of like specifically white males is like their power structure. And you look at the extreme disparities between the two parties and like, Democrats are super diverse. Republicans are still something like 80% white males and like 70% Christian, something like that ballpark figures, right? So then Democrats kind of like every other group gets lumped into the Democratic Party. And then obviously with so many different groups, with so many different needs and political interests and special issues, it's hard to have that giant umbrella, like the big tent politics that keeps everybody happy. It's kind of impossible to keep everybody happy. And then you get like the Democrat who's running for president, and then you get like the Palestinians that split off and like the Muslims, even though Trump is not going to be good for Palestine. It's like, well, we're boycotting the Democratic Party because they're not giving us everything we want. And just things like that. I
There's a
guess I
funny
could rant
comment
about that
saying,
for a
what
while.
is the point of this? And there's really no point. I think, I don't know. My personal philosophy is that everybody's kind of a crybaby, and there's things that people are smart on, and there's things they're dumb on, and there's things they care a lot about, and nothing else is important. And then everyone has a bandwagon that they jump on. And
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like everybody's kind of a crybaby about something.
yeah.
I don't know.
What is the
That's my
point? Yeah.
stance, and I'm
Well,
sticking by.
what is the point of the conversation? I don't know. We're just
Yeah.
talking on a Friday night. Um, any other thoughts on the Trump and Elon feud?
Well,
And
I mean,
other than the Schadenfreude?
to some extent, it's kind of like the funny point, like saying like, "Oh, girls, this or whatever." Like, why are they fighting? And it's like, that's men can't talk about their feelings in a constructive way. Like the whole like alpha male thing, and it's like, yeah, we've got these
Yeah,
people. I don't know. I was joking with some friends earlier, and it's like there's two kinds of like I think it's a joke I heard about like rich people and billionaires. They said there's two kinds of like billionaires: those who desperately want to get on the Forbes like richest 100 list, and then those billionaires who don't want their names on the list because they don't
yeah,
want the notoriety. And
yeah.
it's like
Right.
Trump and Elon Musk are definitely two of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
former.
Yeah, most rich people don't want all of that attention, but Donald Trump famously would just hound like the Forbes people to get on the list when he wasn't a real billionaire, which is just everything you need to know about Donald Trump's personality. I did want to highlight one more thing about the Elon thing. There were a lot of tweets from some conservatives that here's a good one. I just want to read this out loud. Somebody said, oh, hold on. Here we go. Joey Manarino. He tweeted, Trump and Elon aren't attacking one another in a way that won't be fixed. People forget how men with testicles spar. You're watching two people with balls the size of the moon debate an issue. This is what masculinity looks like. And then another one from Jack Posobiec. I think he was like one of the more famous, like, flirtatious neo-Nazi like commentators in like 2017. He hasn't done much lately, I think, but he was kind of big back in Trump's first term, especially at the beginning. He tweeted out, some of y'all can't handle two high agency males going at it, and it really shows. This is direct communication, parentheses, phallocentric, versus indirect communication, parentheses, gynocentric. So turning it again into a male female thing. And he goes, I understand you aren't used to it. Are those the gayest posts you've ever heard of? These masculine guys just really obsessed with ball size.
I mean, it's like
kind of weird.
It's
Yeah.
strange. I don't know why, like, that's the way you decide to defend Trump and Musk. Like, they're not like
talking.
two elk, like running their heads.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they are, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a couple other commentators were speculating that it's actually four-dimensional chess, and this is like some genius way for Elon Musk to kind of softly break from Donald Trump and then get liberals to like Tesla again and start buying his vehicles again, which I think that's a really stupid take. I don't know. I don't know if liberals are going to suddenly forget everything Elon Musk has been doing for the last 2 years as he goes more and more insane. And I don't think liberals are going to flip on a dime and just suddenly love Tesla because 1 or 2 days he starts tweeting annoying things at Trump. Also, the idea that he would be like that this is some bold strategy is like, and the fact that Trump would be in on it, and Trump would, I guess, within this theory, be okay with Elon Musk calling him a pedophile who's included in the Epstein files. That's four-dimensional chess? I don't know. Maybe I'm just not a chess master, I guess.
Yeah, you can't comprehend.
Let's see, and then let's talk about the Doge fallout a little bit while we're on the fact of Elon Musk. Here's a good point from Matt Iglesias. He's got a pretty good Substack that I read pretty often. But he was mentioning, I'll just do a good quote from him. He says, it's clear that a lot of smart, perceptive people in the technology industry who don't follow politics and government closely admired Elon Musk so much that they assumed great things would come of his involvement with government. They found the liberal haters baffling, and as they dissect Musk's failure, I suspect they take comfort in attributing it to things like the Nazi salute allegations against Musk, rather than the fact that the know-it-all so-called experts in the establishment and the media turned out to be basically right. There was dramatically less overt fraud and waste in federal spending than they believed. And so basically the point of that is just that, Republicans have always been coming into office saying, we're going to fix all this corruption. We're going to find all the graft. We're going to go, a big thing for years has been like, we're going to go through the budget line by line by line. And then once again, as they did that, they find that there's really not that much graft. There's really not that many welfare queens. There's really not that much Social Security and Medicare abuse. And then like anytime you kick off a lot of people from these benefits, you're basically screwing over a lot of people who actually depend on it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it's kind of technical and in the weeds, but like, there's typically like layers and layers of people who have to approve funding. So like, that's just me thinking out loud right now, but I almost think like if you really want to just cut like bad spending, like just go like the month before the fiscal year ends and just say, okay, no one can spend any money, because that's typically when organizations will, we have, all that money was, allocated toward the things we actually needed to do. Now we have this leftover money. We don't want to give it up and then lose our budget next year.
Right.
So we should just chop it off right there. I would probably save like 10% of the budget or something. And like, that would be really good. I would say that like, I think you kind of made a point about how Democrats didn't give them like the benefit of the doubt, or they were like naysayers from the beginning. And it's like, I think that's such a funny way of putting it. And it's so obvious because Republicans came in saying, we're basically going to wreck the government. And it's like, well, that's your starting preposition. Then like, yeah, we don't like that. We are against that. And then you come in and do it. You're like, oh, you didn't give us the benefit of the doubt. And you're like, you said you were going to make everything worse from day one, and you did. It's like, where were we going to give you the benefit of the doubt? So,
and there were a lot of quotes of like the government employees should be afraid. They should be terrified. It's like, is that a great way to run any organization? Let alone the maybe most important organization in the entire world is the, U.S. federal government.
Well, most
A good
people like
point.
I don't know. I'll say this again and again and again, but most people don't really understand even probably 10% of what the federal government does, and a lot of it's kind of boring.
Yeah,
And like some of the stuff,
right.
you can
Most of
make
it's
an
boring. Yeah,
argument that the government doesn't need to be doing it, but that's like a different argument than just calling it waste, fraud, and abuse. Because if you come in looking for that and you find stuff that's like, scratch your head, like, should we be doing that? Like, it's like I think Obama talked a lot about in his term that they wanted to reform like the fish and wildlife of like fish that are in saltwater versus fish that are in like freshwater, and like how there's two different organizations with overhead and all blah 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 blah. And it's like
right,
that's the stuff you could fix, but like I don't think at any point you'd say any of that was fraud because they're like
right.
actually helping, like, whether it's aquaculture in inland or off, the coast, that they're actually helping people like make money. That's like I don't know, this is always a soapbox I go back to, but like a lot of the federal government has multiple mandates to help people make people's lives better, promote business, help industry. And when you go into a lot of, especially at the secretariat level, like all these big agencies are actually doing things to help businesses make money. And if you cut it, like, yeah, obviously there's going to be people who resist that, like whether it's businesses, organizations, nonprofits, like individual people, farmers, think of all the programs that benefit farmers, and like none of that's fraud and waste and
Right.
abuse. We give tons of money to all kinds of people. None of it's like fraud. That doesn't mean there's not some fraud, but I don't know, if
Right.
2% of your spending goes to like questionable people who maybe do or don't deserve it, like that's not a reason to just call it all fraud. But I don't know, that's a long
Yeah.
tirade.
And it misses a point too that like the most fraud is essentially like tax fraud, I would imagine. Like most of the fraud is just like really rich people figuring out ways to pretend they made no money. Or they move all of their corporate headquarters to Ireland or the Cayman Islands or whatever. Most fraud is not necessarily the government doing things. It's literally just Americans not paying what they should into the treasury.
Yeah, and
There's
I would imagine that it's actually incredibly hard to do fraud in most places of the government just because like the GSA has so many rules on like how you do contracts and stuff, and like there's not like a GS 11, the GS scale, like 1 to 15, right? And then
yeah,
SES. But it's like a GS 11 doesn't just make contracts and then like it happens and like, oh, I just put all these millions of dollars in a bank account. Like it'll go to a
right.
13, it'll go to a 14, a 15, and then it gets approved. And then someone at GSA might audit it, and all these like Byzantine like things that would catch frauds.
And
I mean, the
inspector
premise.
generals that go through and look over everything.
Oh yeah, and then it's like the classic thing too, like uh, your coworker comes in a Lamborghini one day, and you're like, "Hey, you're a GS11. How'd you afford that?" Like, you'd think you'd be
Yeah,
able to catch that, and that doesn't
right,
happen. I don't think a lot of GS11s and 12s are really like living the high life off the government teat, as they say.
right, right. Another good point is that like the lie that Social Security just had like millions of people who are dead, and like it turned out ultimately that it's just like an old system, and so they're not giving out payments to these people, but they just weren't necessarily deleting those people. So then Elon Musk claims that like people who are like would be like 140 years old are still collecting payments, and that turned out not to be true. But of course,
Oh,
they
I've
don't
heard
ever
that.
admit
Yeah.
that. They don't go public and say, "Oh, we made a mistake. Sorry." We were wrong about that. They're not actually getting the payments, but unfortunately now, I mean, millions of Fox News viewers literally believe that that was happening and probably still believe that it's still going on. But
It's like
basically,
I think it would be good to explain like the way I heard it, and I don't know if you heard it to this level of detail, is just the fact that like if you're like an Italian and you come to America legally and get a green card and work here for 15 years, like you'll get signed up for Social Security even though you don't get it because you're paying into it. So then like let's say you go back to Italy, like and then like 20 years later you die, like nobody's telling the state of Nebraska where you worked that you
right.
died in Italy, and no one's telling the federal government. Like the Italian state's not telling the federal government this person
Yeah.
died. And then like
Right.
okay, so this person's like presumably like 70 years old. Like, why would the Social Security agency go all that trouble auditing all this stuff for someone who's never going to get a payment? So then you do get these inflated rolls of people who paid in. Some of them will never even be beneficiaries of it. And then the other thing they were saying is just like the federal government doesn't necessarily have a good way of just being, this is something that a lot of states, like if you die in Alabama, like it's not necessarily true that the federal government or someone at the Social Security offices are just going to hear about that. And the way they were explaining it is it's just really complicated between the federal level,
Right.
like the local, state, and federal level. And so to some point, like you never got a Social Security check, but your name's on a roll, you paid into it, they're blah blah blah, and it's really complicated.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, that, most of the government waste or like the seeming waste or inefficiencies are essentially the fact that the government is following the law. The biggest problem is that a lot of these systems are old. A lot of the technology that the agencies use are old, and some of it has to do with security. And, Congress is the one that spends the money to build the systems. So if Congress is not actively, innovating those systems, making new bills and putting more funding to update the systems, like the military is kind of guilty of this, where they're using real old technology, but it's just Congress is not doing its job, right? Like basically all of these agencies and departments are following all these laws, but maybe the laws were written in the 60s and the 70s. So Congress is not necessarily doing a great job of updating, revising these systems and making it more efficient. So that would be a good thing, that we want the government to be more efficient. But then obviously Elon Musk is going around and pointing at things. Oh, this is inefficient. Again, that's Congress not doing its job, not necessarily that the government is breaking the law. They're actually following the law to a T. It's just the law is bad and outdated.
Well, I think it's funny because like almost every problem, to your point, is like, in my opinion, Congress, because first off, they don't really know what they're doing. So they lean on lobbying groups to help them write bills, and then they just pass bills and don't have a good idea. But then they
Yeah,
purposely make them vague because Congress doesn't want to be responsible for it going
right.
like sideways. And then they hand it off to the executive branch and it's some agency, and they say, you're going to do this. But it's so vague when the agency says, oh, we think we're going to interpret this way to make it work. Then every impacted business immediately sues that executive agency, and then it
Right.
gets looped up in the courts, and then the courts say, "Oh, how do we determine what Congress meant?" And it's like, well, you could ask Congress, but they don't really give like opinions when they write bills what they intend or mean because they want it to
Yeah,
be
right.
vague. And then on top of that, you have members of the executive go in front of Congress just to get yelled at by individual Congress members trying to get on TV, and the whole
Yeah,
system's just fucked
right.
and so stupid,
Uh-huh.
in my humble opinion.
Yeah. And then going on with the fraud and the things that Elon Musk has kind of fucked up calling fraud, USAID, it's like 1% of government spending and is maybe the best bang for its buck that the government does like across the world. And there was an interesting study that Boston University found that the body count of death from the lack of resources and medicine and vaccines and everything that USAID does is estimated it's killed like six figures worth of people already, and it could lead up to 1 million deaths per year from like malaria, HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis. So a lot of things that the government actually does really well and really efficiently and makes America look good, and it's that kind of soft power that benefits America's kind of hegemonic cultural influence. They just kind of fuck that up completely. And then it's the same thing with Trump's proposed cuts to Medicaid. That could one estimate was that like these cuts to Medicaid could kill an American every 18 minutes because you're just screwing people out of healthcare, and then obviously they're going to just die from preventable diseases and things like that. They're not going to get the help they want. Obviously, another big difference is a new change that's for the worse is the FAA lawsuits. So all of the airlines and airports kind of getting fucked up. And that affects me a lot. I travel a lot. I don't want to die in a plane crash. And already, like, I'm getting delays constantly. Like, I've been traveling a lot the last few months. And I feel like almost every single flight I have been on for like a month or two has been delayed. I
Hmm.
had to stay the night in Chicago. And it's the kind of thing, it's like, you don't have enough workers. And then, like, an airport like Newark gets really backed up and they don't have enough FAA people to make it safe. And then every flight coming out of Newark gets delayed, which means every place that goes to, those flights get delayed. And so, yeah, they're making my life worse. And that's not even, they're not even taking away like my malaria medicine or whatever.
If
Um,
we've talked about this before, but I'm going to interject about the USAID thing. I always think it's so funny the lack of strategy the federal government typically has, and like I don't think people realize the extent to which like American companies are so dominant and American culture is so dominant. Like in some ways, it would probably be good, like just across the board for America, if every single person in every developing country just had 10,000 extra dollars. And so, like, if we can facilitate that, whether it's just giving like malaria nets to keep mosquitoes from giving people malaria in sub-Saharan Africa, keeping people from dying from AIDS, helping, for pennies in the dollar that we spend, helping countries develop, like all of that inherently will lead to a better future for America. It's like the altruistic like selfishness, right? It's simultaneously altruistic because we're doing this, but in the long run, it's going to
right,
benefit us. Like we're America. Like everything that makes the world more stable, more rich, more consumers, more people
right.
capable of buying stuff. that benefits us like exponentially more than any other country. Like no one's buying, people buy stuff from China, and they are competing for resources and stuff, but like that's because they're dealing with failed states that the whole rest of the world is helping facilitate. America is one of the few countries that is capable of helping countries not be failed states, and when countries aren't failed states, it helps us. So that's like the selfish part. The other thing is like the military. We spend $800 billion in the military. You don't have to intervene in non-failed states.
Yeah,
So if we
right.
don't want to spend money and we want to make money, we should promote less. The countries that benefit from failed states are Iran, China, Russia. Like they just go in with mercenary
Yeah.
groups, take the resources, keep the people down.
Yeah.
They set
Governments
up
that don't even
dictators.
pretend
Yeah,
to care about human rights and civil rights and that kind of
yeah.
thing and
I mean,
just
it's
want to
like the same.
exploit any vacuum.
Yeah, I mean, like people have discussions like in the military, right? Like I'll ask you this: if if the UK were to just have magically overnight 6 aircraft carriers, would you like thumbs up or thumbs down? It's like obviously thumbs up. Like it's good for us if our allies have stuff, and whether it's military capabilities, whether it's a big dynamic economy. That's like the EU with Ukraine. It would be good for America if the
Yeah.
war in Ukraine stops and Ukraine with 40 million people makes the EU and Europe better. And that makes us
Right.
better and it makes us richer because they'll all buy American stuff. And, even though we don't manufacture as much stuff as China or as we did like in the past, like they'll still buy all our services. All our multinational companies will set up shop in Ukraine and have 40 million new consumers making more money. I don't know. And
Yeah. No,
it also, the last thing I'll say is it goes to like the whole debate about our debt. People say, "Oh, we'll grow out of it," and it's like we won't grow out of our debt if we purposely make the rest of the world worse. Like
yeah, yeah,
the
right.
entire proposition of us growing out of this massive debt we're leaving the next 2 generations is, kind of predicated on the fact that the world should be stable, have stable governments with rich people getting richer and having a better life and standard of living, which, pays us. That's a long
Yeah.
soapbox diatribe, but I don't know.
No, that's a good idea. I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about too with the tariffs and why it's so stupid and so bad. The idea that like the trade deficit hurts America because like Bangladesh buys less stuff from us than we buy from them. But Bangladesh is a small country and the people are much, much poorer. So like not only on a per capita basis, certainly on a national basis, Bangladesh will never be able to buy as much stuff from us as we can buy from them. We have more money. We have a bigger population. We buy stuff cheaper from them. They would buy more expensive stuff from us. So it's just like literally ludicrous to think that Bangladesh is, like somehow conning us out of all of our money because we're basically just buying cheap clothes that we don't want to make ourselves from them. And then,
Well, there's like a temporal aspect of that, right? Like, so a country that's developing and does not have a lot of industry, they are not even capable of being very big consumers of our stuff. Like, think of a big bank like Goldman Sachs. They come in and help companies, invest in the stock market, put out bonds, do all kinds of stuff with financial services that some
Mhm.
developing countries literally don't have because they're developed.
Right.
They're not developed yet. So if we like help them get to the stage where they are developed, then they will buy all these services which we export en masse to other countries. And then, it's investing in their future and our future in a way. And I don't know, maybe that's like the globalist liberal in me, but I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Right. Globalist.
Steve Bannon
Yeah.
be rolling around
Yeah.
the
Right.
stadium right now.
Yeah. I had one more point about Medicare while we were talking about that. Well, I guess first I'll ask, what's your impression of the Build Back Better from the news that you have kind of consumed? What do you think are the chances that Senate Republicans will pass the
Build
House
back better,
bill?
or you mean the
Or
big beautiful
yeah, sorry,
bill?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's still BBB, isn't it? Yeah, sorry.
I thought it was
The
weird how
big
they changed
beautiful
its
bill.
name. Yeah.
It's just Trump. Just the Trumps always copy everything. The Obamas and Bidens do. But what do you think? Do you think there's any chance that Senate Republicans will vote for the House bill or come up with their own version that's similar enough that will have the House agree to it? Do you think the Medicare cuts are a step too far? And then if Senate Republicans come up with their own BBB, will House Republicans have any chance of passing a ostensibly much more moderate and kind of normie package from the Senate?
That's a good question. And I think for prediction time, it's kind of funny. We'll see how wildly wrong this is. But I would imagine that the Senate will think, where I think the Senate will improve the bill and take some of the bad stuff, like the Medicare cuts. I think it is
Hmm.
likely that the Senate would probably be more pro BBB that doesn't cut Medicare, but but then it's like interesting to think about because a lot of them say it's unconscionable to basically put more debt on the books right now. So I don't know what'll happen, honestly.
Because I mean, that's
I finished my
essentially the
prediction with I don't know.
yeah. 'Cause they essentially can't do what they want to do, right? They can't increase spending for things like the dumb shit Trump wants. They can't make all of these cuts and then cut the deficit while still doing these massive tax cuts, right? And some of the tax cuts are like, aren't some of the tax cuts literally just keeping going the tax cuts that are already existing? Like, if they don't do this
Yeah,
bill, taxes just go up to the level prior to Trump's first round of tax cuts in his first term, right?
I think so.
Something like that. But it's just like, it's the idea that, some Senate Republicans have mentioned this. Rand Paul's really against it. But just the idea, like, we're making such large tax cuts when everyone is saying that the debt is a problem. Like, at a certain point, right? Billionaires are just going to have to start paying more in taxes, right? It may really hurt Republican souls to someday
Or companies, I
vote
guess.
for it or at least not obstruct it. Yeah, or companies. But I mean, the debt is such a problem now. And it's like, Republicans have always been saying it's a problem. It hasn't really affected us now. But now that interest rates are starting to climb back up, and now we are spending more on the interest of the debt than we spend on the entire military. And then we're just going to make the debt worse. Like, we really are just, I think one senator was talking about how, like, us old farts need to stop screwing over our grandkids. But I
I
don't know.
think
Do you
it's
think there would
weird.
be any sense?
I don't
Yeah, go
know. I've
ahead.
been hearing a lot on like the podcast I listen to talking about how Democrats spend like drunken sailors and Republicans spend like tipsy sailors. But I don't know. I don't even know if that's fair because like if you go back 30 years, right? Bill Clinton had a budget surplus, and then you think of the 21st century, it's just George W. Bush got us into two wars and then a financial crisis. So like I don't know if blaming Democrats for the spending Obama had to do to save the economy and then the spending, arguably Biden spent way more than he probably needed to, or that was needed to get us out of the COVID issue. But I don't know. I don't know if I agree with the premise that a lot of people and political pundits right now are talking about. Like, I don't think you can really quantify Democrat spending, at least under Clinton, who had a budget surplus, and then Obama, who was obviously dragged down by arguably the greatest economic problem since like the Great Depression. So I don't
Right.
know. It's I think everything I'm hearing about this debate is kind of wrong, and except the people saying that our debt is too high, and I guess we'll just see if Congress does anything about it. Some of them say they're not going to support something that puts $2 trillion more dollars on the debt, but I guess we'll see if they get phone calls from Trump and if they end up voting for it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the House did that. I know Marjorie Taylor Greene came out saying she regretted, I guess voting for it because of the thing. There's like in the House bill, it says you cannot regulate AI companies for 10 years, which just seems preposterous. Like, no
Yeah, it makes sense.
regulations. That's just like a blanket ban on any regulations. That seemed like literally absurd, but
I have a question for you.
yeah.
Like what I was kind of saying before, what are your thoughts on that? This is something I'm just thinking out loud, but I feel like the accusation that Democrats spend a lot of money goes back to like the 60s and 70s. And I mean, our debt back then was so quaint at like I think George W. Bush ended his term with like $8 trillion or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, what a small amount. Like, I don't even know if saying the Democrats spend too much is even like a coherent argument anymore.
Well, I mean, it's like it's unfair too because you look at the thing, like the messes that Democrats have inherited, right? Obama inherited this like economic free fall. Biden inherited the COVID crisis that Trump certainly made worse because of his kind of bumbling incompetence, and then obviously Trump raised the debt quite a bit with his tax cuts. So to like really blame Democrats who are like the only party that have ever actually like kind of paired spending increases with tax increases as well as some cuts. So Democrats, like every package they put together, Republicans basically filibuster anything and obstruct it until they get some manner of cuts. There was like the fiscal cliff with Obama where they just keep screwing over and demanding all these cuts. So Democrats are really the only ones who kind of get the deficit down. Republicans, they talk a good game, but they never really try to fix the deficit problem, which makes the debt worse. So it's
Well,
just,
what I
I
would
don't know
say
if I
is,
agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, part of it is just like if you think of the last 30 years, economic theory is often kind of simple, sometimes too simplified, but like the
Yeah.
logic of just when times are good, you save money, which is what Clinton
Right.
did, right? We had a $200 billion surplus. And then when times were good, when George Bush took the, White House, they immediately put a tax cut and we
Yeah.
eliminated the savings, right? Obama spent money because he had to, and then Trump came into office, things were getting better, the deficit was going down, and then immediately just cut taxes again. It's like I feel like the argument about Democrats spending too much or government in general is just so disingenuous. I don't know. That's a long
Well,
tirade. We
especially
can move on, but
Well, no, well, yeah. One more point is just, especially when you compare job growth from Democratic presidents to Republican presidents, and when most of Republican talking points about tax cuts are that it grows the economy, but it's actually Democratic policies that result in like massive job growth and things like that. That then have more people paying taxes. It gets more money, in paying laborers, and then they spend that money. So like the kind of bottom up I guess trickle up instead of a trickle down kind of thing is really a part of Democratic policies. And then I think I never mentioned that point when I brought up Medicare again. I just wanted to say this that like once again with the Medicare cuts, Republicans fuck over their most voters the most. I just always like to call this out that New York City, San Francisco, their hospitals are giant markets, giant cities. Those hospitals are going to be able to weather the storm of these cuts for Medicare and things like that. It's these rural states and these rural counties in the middle of nowhere that are going to not have any, they don't have the market forces to stay open unless they have government spending. So, I will say this till probably I die, unless Republicans change. It's just Republicans always screw over their own voters the most. So, any last thoughts on that before I move on?
no, my last thought is like, I don't know, we've talked about this many times before. You only live in a country and pay taxes to get stuff. And like to
Yeah,
have debates about what you get. I just have a hard time thinking like we spend $6 trillion a year. Like, why can't some of that be for healthcare? It's like,
yeah,
why do
right.
they have such an ideological, bent against healthcare spending? It's like the same thing
Well,
with
that's
like a local
yeah.
government. Like they have property taxes, make better roads, right?
Yeah,
Fix the
we're
roads,
getting a
have
lot of
better
hearts on
schools.
this. Thanks for all the
Yeah,
hearts, everybody.
yeah,
And then, yeah, and this is one thing that I think John Thune, the Majority Leader, was mentioning that like we think we need to go into a employer-based healthcare system again, and it's like we already learned that lesson prior to Obamacare. Almost everybody got their health insurance from their employer, which means that part-time workers who don't have enough hours don't have health insurance. What are they going to do? Self-employed people that don't have a boss that's giving them health insurance and they don't have the money or enough people to get like the subsidies to do it. How are they going to have health insurance? People get stuck in their jobs and then their employers take advantage of them because they can't leave their jobs because they're dependent on that health insurance. So it's like we literally have already learned all of these lessons. It's like you need to have some kind of backstop for health insurance for people whose job like bosses suck or they just they don't earn the benefits from their work if they don't get enough hours. So just always annoying.
yeah,
Republicans screw people over.
yeah.
And I wanted to mention this. You mentioned George W. Bush, and we talked about this in the past, but I was just curious if you wanted to talk about that, the way kind of like rehabbing George W. Bush's kind of his legacy, because obviously like he gets shit on for Katrina and Iraq, but in terms of like some of the things like setting up the USAID programs for like AIDS and different diseases in
PEPFAR.
Africa. He gets lauded for a lot of stuff like that. You did have the what is it, the compassionate conservatism that was kind of his brand, but I wonder if like long
Wait,
term,
it
if
turns out that he and his father were the only Republicans who really believed in that compassionate
yeah, right,
conservatism, even though they all
yeah.
talked about it.
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of obvious though that like Iraq and then obviously like the mishandling of Afghanistan and kind of taking your eye off the ball by going into Iraq, is that kind of like a President Johnson thing where like, he tried to do a
I
lot
don't
of good
know.
for society, but got bogged down in
Let's have a
Vietnam?
polarizing debate. No, like we've talked about this before, but I really feel like to some extent, like the idea, especially in 2001, certainly with Afghanistan, the idea that you would go in and take out a, bad government doing bad things and then like trying to promote democracy and freedom was like a good idea. It failed spectacularly for
Yeah,
reasons I think that are unrelated to like there's a lot of racist explanations or, whatever the term is for anti-religion. Like there are a lot of Muslim countries with, democratic institutions in Southeast Asia where they have higher percentages of women, in their parliaments or government than, Western countries. So it's not
Yeah.
like I don't agree with the idea that like Islam or Muslim countries in general could not have democracy. They couldn't have freedom. They couldn't have all these things. So I think like to some extent, the idea of trying to make the world a better place, maybe that's like the naive American in me, like the idea that America could step in and,
Hmm.
whether it's World War One, World War Two, it's kind of what was the joke that the Prime Minister of England said sitting next to Woodrow Wilson, and the Prime Minister or President of France is like, I have Napoleon on one side and Jesus Christ on the other. And it's like I
Yeah.
feel like there
Right.
is kind of American like naivety about that, where like we can kind of go in, or we think we can go in and fix a place, but I don't know. I don't think that like the failure that Iraq became is a very big indictment on the idea that you can make a country a better place. I mean, you see it in Syria right now. I mean, it's a roll of the dice of what will happen in the future, but like the idea that like just taking Assad out wouldn't, at least have a chance of making the world a better place, or the country, certainly
Yeah.
Syria, a
Right.
better place. So I don't know. But I will
I
say,
actually had that. I actually had that segue, by the way. So I was going to ask, like, what your opinions on Syria right now is, because obviously,
are you done talking
kind
about
of
George
learning.
W. Bush in Iraq?
Well, yeah, well, learning the lesson, because, like, obviously, the biggest problem I would say from Iraq was the de-Baathification process, where they told, it's the kind of thing where it's like a uniparty system with a bloodthirsty dictator who didn't mind killing anybody and everybody. So you had to belong to his party to get like any civil service job or to like maybe get ahead in that society. Are we maybe learning the lessons of Iraq here in Syria? I will give Trump a little bit of credit that he took Syria off the state, what is it, the state sponsored terror list or whatever, so that a lot of companies and then other governments and NGOs, things like that, can invest some money to fixing up Syria and get investment to make the society a little more stable. And then a big thing right now is I think we are giving them a pass of letting a lot of like previous terrorist group fighters into the Syrian military and not sanctioning them because of that. And obviously, it's kind of like the de-Baathification thing. A lot of those soldiers and fighters are really just doing it because it's the only source of money, and everyone
Yeah.
was in a militia. Everyone's killing everybody. So if you wanted to survive, get money, have a job, or just not die from the other militia groups, you kind of had to join a group that then got deemed like a terrorist group by America.
Well, there's a
So
joke. There's a very apt joke, and it's like, what do you call a room with 100 people with one guy with a gun? And it's like you call that one guy a majority. So a lot of these countries, there's nothing
yeah,
they can do. And in some respects, in my mind, maybe again, maybe there's like the ideological blinders. But if you've got a bunch of people running around with guns and they have a majority of everything going on in a country, I don't think it's necessarily fair to like blame the country or the people, the culture, the religion. And
right.
it's like, I mean, it's a public benefit, cost analysis, right? Do you want a basically failed state with a dictator, basically giving mineral rights to Russia and China, and then keeping people down, shooting people in the streets, jailing people? And it's like, obviously, democracies can be messy. If they don't have the support or security, they're not going to, operate and function. I mean, America is really blessed and lucky that we, in our revolution, a, had George Washington, someone who was willing to give up power, and then B, you had a lot of rich people who bought into the system and wanted to create a fair system. It wasn't fair for everybody. It wasn't
Yeah, right.
perfect for 80 years, but most countries, like if you just take a country in the Middle East, take out the dictator and go, here you guys go, have a democracy, have that. Like,
Yeah,
what are the
right.
odds you're gonna have a George Washington? What are the odds you're gonna
Yeah,
have the
right.
elites buy into it? Coups become really common when it's just simple. You have a couple guys
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
military
right.
go, take the government or take the capital, go sit
Yeah.
in the governor's mansion, and
Yeah,
then
no.
suddenly the country's yours. And
That's a
and
really
then to
good
say
point.
that, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's a really good point, especially considering how different kind of culturally and economically a lot of the 13 original colonies were. Like, obviously, the hardcore slave states versus the North that were kind of like Britain and phasing out slavery and a little less, I guess, overtly racist. And then certainly, like, it would have been bad, obviously, with the Articles of Confederation not being that great of a binding kind of agreement between them all. It was nice that the 13 colonies didn't start immediately feuding with each other and then taking, their little militia groups and fighting each other. And then obviously we're extremely lucky that, Washington chose not to be a king when I guess, he literally could have been and people were kind of like asking him to become one. And then he stepped down after 2 terms. And then we're lucky that basically all the presidents until FDR kind of respected that precedent, or
Yeah.
at least I guess, or at least American voters did, you
Well,
know?
I mean, if you're gonna take this analogy further, like one of the problems with like Iraq was that in our Civil War, we had people fighting against each other, and this side that respected individual liberty, freedom, and human rights. And eventually, right, Lincoln didn't start the war going after slavery, but it became
Right.
about that at the end of the war, and that side won. In Iraq, there was no side of inclusive liberals who want to just promote
Right.
democracy, freedom, human rights, freedom of religion, all that stuff. So that's why it failed. So I mean, in that way, we are lucky. I mean, if the South had won, I mean, they'd be like a probably kind of a failed state, or they would have been like what
Yeah.
South
Right.
Africa was. They would have had
Yeah.
to change one way or another, and maybe it would have
Yeah.
been just
Right.
as ugly as anywhere else.
Yeah, I kind of like that counterfactual of like, what if the Civil War never happened or the South had won? Because I think Brazil was the last country to outlaw slavery in 1888, which means that like if you're let's pick the end of the Civil War 1865, let's say the South had won, they essentially had 23 years left before suddenly the Confederate States of America are literally the only country on earth anymore with slavery. And then would that have worked well for them when everywhere else is outlawing slavery? Where they have a lot of boycotts of all their products that were just dependent on these cash crops, that they didn't have any laborers to do because it was all slave. Would that have been good for them, or would they have been like a failed state? Or would they have
Well,
broken up? They didn't really have a
yeah.
strong government too. So a lot of their states, and that's, one of the reasons they lost the war was every state was kind of keeping its militia, protecting its own state. They didn't really have a national force like the North did, but
Yeah.
what do you think? In staying on Syria, just one more point. Do you think this is good for Europe if Syria becomes a stable place? Can a lot of refugees move back? Do you think a lot of refugees will want to move back to Syria, or will it be good for liberal governments in some of these Western democracies in Europe that took in a lot of refugees? Will it become a bigger thing that they try to push these refugees back and say, now you're no longer a refugee because your country's back? Any thoughts on any of those topics?
I think it'd be incredibly complicated, right? Like if you've been living in Germany for 10 years and you've kind of bought into oh, we should respect gay rights and freedom.
Yeah,
It's like if you
right.
go back to Syria, that's not going to be the case. Also, a lot of those countries, a lot of people get money from the government, which is very nice for your standard of living. If you go back to Syria, it's a failed state. Wherever you used to live, there's a probably high likelihood it's been bombed to rubble. Like you don't have a house.
Yeah, right.
Like, are there jobs? Like, you just talked about how people are joining the militia because there's nothing else. Like, if you're like a carpenter in Germany right now or doing some manual labor, and it's like, are you gonna be
Yeah,
able to do that in Syria? Like, how well do your kids speak the language? Like, I don't know. I think it's gonna be complicated, and I don't know. You like to think that like Syria would be a better country that their Syrians who fled the civil war would want to come back to, but I don't know. It's a different culture. And if you've been living in the West for 10 years, that's like people rag on the West, but I imagine most people around the world, if they live in a Western country with freedom, democracy, respect for human rights, like, yeah, you probably don't want to go back. You've been living in, if you're Egyptian and you fled like the previous regime or whatever, and like, would you want to move back? Like, I don't know, pick another
right.
state, Sudan. If you're Sudanese, you know, go back to South Sudan just because, you can, and it's its own
Yeah.
country. It's in a civil war right now. How many other countries are on the Actually, this is an interesting topic I've been thinking about a lot. And I don't know, maybe this is too patriotic and like jingoistic of me, but it's just like the thought of like, if America disappeared, how many countries do you think would have a war with another in the next 12 months? Like like how many
That's an
countries
interesting thought.
are
Yeah.
not invading their neighbors because they know an aircraft carrier will come and they'll probably be bombed and the US will lead the United Nations to
Right.
sanction them and we'll turn
Yeah.
off all their money. They won't be able to buy anything and it's like they won't be able
Right.
to use dollars and they'll have their neighbors, the state, those annoying State Department diplomats in every country around them telling the other governments around them, don't work with them, don't negotiate, this is not okay. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting thought. And a lot of times, like America's, the negative opinions on America and our interventions around the world, it's kind of like a lose-lose where if we don't do anything, we're shitty for not doing anything and intervening and like, pick out like any conflict that we didn't intervene in and we're the problem. And then the conflicts that we do intervene in, we obviously don't do it perfectly. And then we're, also a little bit villainized for things not going perfectly in the countries we do try to intervene in and, protect human rights and make a stable place. So, yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on the Houthis in Yemen and like what we were doing?
Um, It's interesting that Trump was like bombing them, and I guess now he just made a deal of like we've lost some very expensive drones, and I guess that's good for the Houthis that they can knock out some
Oh,
of our like 30 million Predator drones or whatever with like whatever relatively, I guess not primitive, but like obviously they don't have the full military capacity that we have. So Trump made this deal where they're not going to bomb us, but now the Houthis are just bombing Israel. Which, again, Israel's our ally, so that's got to be maybe awkward between Netanyahu and Trump, maybe. But but it's the kind of thing. It's like we can't. That's an unwinnable war. I don't know. The
is
Houthis are
it?
such
I
a
don't know.
large.
They stopped.
Well, the war's still going on. Don't they still not like Saudi Arabia and Israel? Aren't they still like at any moment a potential thorn in the side of world
Yeah.
trade going through the Red Sea?
No, I just think it's interesting because like one of the things the Biden administration was doing was not going after them very hard or just trying to like baseline it, and I think that wasn't working. And it's one of those things. It's like the cost benefit analysis. Do you try to stop it ASAP or just keep spending more money in the long run or making things worse? Like I think I don't know. I I don't know if I have strong opinions on this, but it seems like, pick a country and they're just lobbing missiles in another country. Like we're the global superpower. We don't want that. Like, do we want
Yeah,
every ocean going cargo ship to have to go around Africa and spend X amount of more money and delay things and delay trade, make it more expensive, increase like shipping rates? Like, I don't know.
right.
And I feel like, this goes to the
Do
thing
you know
like
what the
how much.
deal is? Do you know what exactly the deal is? Are we giving them aid or something?
No, so
Like, what was the deal he made?
we started bombing them more to get them to
Right.
stop, and then they said we don't like getting bombed so much, so we're willing to talk, and then they
Oh,
did, and
okay.
then they agreed to stop trying to bomb Western shipping, and I believe I
That
don't
was
know what
nice of them.
yeah. No, but I mean, it's like the thing. It's like, well, if they can sustain, us bombing them a little bit, and they just keep doing it, like,
Yeah, right.
yeah, at what point? And this is like, before I was talking about like the ideological naivety of me thinking America could come in and fix a country, and it's like, well, maybe we're also really good at getting countries to stop being assholes, and maybe that's the flip side of America's role in the world that people take for granted. Because name another country that could stop the Houthi rebels from doing what they're doing. It's probably nobody. Like I
Yeah,
don't think
that's
the
true.
Russians could stop them. The Chinese definitely couldn't. So
Yeah, but in terms of like an actual war, like Saudi Arabia wasn't able to pacify them after all. It's kind of like Afghanistan. It's like the Taliban have been fighting for like what 50 years or something like that. Like at a
yeah.
certain point, and even to the point now that like the Taliban are apparently feeling a little blue because they missed the glory days of like riding into battle. And now they're just like traffic cops, kind of, like trying to get the society back together. It's maybe a little less boring. You got to be you're no longer with the boys in your cave. You know?
Oh, those poor guys.
Yeah. Speaking of boys, let's move to the Proud Boys here in America. Maybe our own internal little terror group.
I may need
I,
to. We may need to wrap this up because Thor just puked in the carpet.
oh, your
What
dog
I get for
puked.
taking
Okay.
him to the beach.
Was he
Just
drinking
ate.
seawater?
Oh yeah, he drinks tons of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and ate a bunch of sand. So sorry, everybody.
Okay. All right. Well, well, I guess we'll end it there. Thanks for listening, everybody. We got 163 people listening now.
Wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, let me just hawk my book real quick. I write satire at the Halfway Post. Thanks for following me on the Halfway Cafe. Check out my books if you're interested in my comedy. I wrote satire on the Trump years and satire on the Biden years. It's literally 8 years worth of my comedy, all compiled into what I think is a funny book. So I wrote the book I wanted to read. Check that out if you like this. Anything you want to plug for yourself?
No, I'm slowly trying to write articles.
You got on what nitwit politics? Is
Yeah,
that what it is? Yeah, nitwit politics.
yeah.
Okay. All
Follow
right.
me on
Thanks for listening.
Substack for the articles I may or may not write at a very timely
Yeah.
fashion.
Right. Yeah. Jane B in North Carolina says
You're
thank you.
welcome.
Thank you for listening, everybody. And tune in next week. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody. See ya.